Hiya, darling.
Oh, hi, girl. Sorry. The Zoom just said in my ear this meeting is being recorded really loud, so I was hearing her voice. But
No worries.
hello.
There was a delay. That's all good. So I can't believe that it's been 6 months that we've seen each other, but we've spoken since then. So
Not really. I mean, kind of, but we definitely are due for a catch up. So,
yes. So tell me, what did I miss in the last 6 months then?
oh my gosh. Well, where do I start? Well, I think
January.
we came off the heels of me becoming debt free, and we went to go celebrate and had a
Hmm.
great time in Jersey City. And since then, I have been living my best debt free life. Okay. Keeping my nails done, hair did, everything
Ooh.
did. And have recently pivoted because when I was on my own debt free journey, I was kind of basically sharing with other people how I was doing it. I would get a ton of questions. I created a workbook. And so I feel like I was kind of like pushed into the debt-free personal finance space, which
Yeah.
was fine because that was the journey that I was on. But since then, I have pivoted and decided, or realized, not even decided, that my passion is actually confidence coaching and coaching people to achieve their dreams, push past self-doubt, self-limiting beliefs, all of that fun stuff. And so that has been my recent transition, and I'm currently working on my program, my coaching program for that. So
Yay.
definitely stay tuned, more to come there. I feel like I've been working so much, but it's been fun. And then of course my podcast as well, Shine Bright Podcasts.
Hmm.
Been putting out episodes every other Wednesday now. It was every Wednesday, but your
Okay.
girl also has a full-time job, as you know. So it's now every other Wednesday to give myself some breathing room.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I've also started to travel a bit domestically just to see friends and family. So that has
Hmm.
been fun. And just being outside a little bit, safely, but outside.
Yes.
So yeah, that's what I've been doing. What have you been doing?
Oh my gosh, so much has happened since we last spoke, but I want to borrow one of your questions. When you interviewed me for your podcast, you had this amazing question, which is, how is your heart? And I want to ask you that question before I tell you what's going on
Oh
with
my
me.
gosh, I have a love-hate relationship with that question now
Ah!
because it really does get so deep. My heart, it's so funny. I was actually just writing a email to my email list about this. I feel like I am coming out of quarantine as such a different person. I don't know if you feel this way. But I just feel like it's almost like being in an incubator for a year
Yeah.
and a half, and then you're coming out and you're like, whoa, what the heck? So I feel like that's where I'm at. I'm in a season of transition. And
Yeah.
as I'm coming back and interacting with familiar places, familiar people in familiar spaces, some of these spaces I'm feeling like I've outgrown. And there's a part of me that grieves
Mhm.
that. That's really sad about like, dang, I don't fit here anymore. Or dang, this
Yeah.
friendship doesn't feel the same. Or we've grown into different people that, there's still love, but maybe we just aren't compatible anymore. We're just in
Yeah.
different seasons of life. Um, so I've been grappling with like the grief of that, but also the excitement of like this new person
The
that I feel like
new.
I am. And so I talk about the caterpillar and the butterfly. Everyone talks about that when they talk about change,
Mhm.
but I feel like everyone talks about the caterpillar to a butterfly transition as if it's like this great thing, and the caterpillar is so excited to be a butterfly. But like, what if the caterpillar is sad that it's not a caterpillar
Yeah.
anymore? Like, what if it's afraid of heights and now it has these wings and it can't crawl
Right.
anywhere, it has to fly?
Yeah.
So I feel like that's where I'm at. I'm reintroducing myself in the world as a butterfly, but I'm also grieving the fact that I'm not a caterpillar anymore. I don't know if that's
Mm.
super deep, but that is how my heart is. Just giving myself grace
Yeah.
in this change. And like, I mean, we were stuck in the house for a year and a half.
I know.
Like so much happened,
Right.
and yeah, I'm just a different person. I'm giving myself grace to be that different person.
Yeah. And one of the things you know about me is that I'm not here for the shallow. Like, I'm not here for the chit chat. So that was a perfect answer. And I promise you, I'm going to tell you what's going on with me. But when
Okay.
you talk, when you talked about not fitting in, that was such a good perspective, because a lot of times we think that maybe something is wrong with us, or maybe something is
Mhm.
wrong with the friends. And it really has nothing to do with either party. It's just that space. So I
Yeah.
love how you put it in terms of, maybe this is just not a fit anymore. It's just like clothes.
Yeah.
Okay, I lost some weight. This outfit doesn't fit anymore. I gained some weight. So it's a little snug, it's a little tight, maybe even stifling, right? So
Yeah.
if you think of that as a relationship, then I love that parallel that you drew in terms of, the butterfly and the caterpillar. And yes, sometimes, my thing is do it, but do it afraid, right?
Mhm.
So as the butterfly, you're gonna fly even if you have to do it afraid. But then to
Yeah.
your point, I love that perspective of just the other side. Because a lot of times we're like, flight, soar, go, go, go. And you're like,
Mhm.
but what if I want to stay over here? I do want to
Yeah.
ride with these friends on the bus for a little bit longer? So
Exactly.
I think that was beautiful. So I'm glad that you're growing, and I'm also happy that you're giving yourself space and grace to, I don't know if you want to use the word grieve, but to just stay
Mhm.
in that process and feel all the feels. So
Yeah.
kudos to you for giving yourself permission to feel that.
Thanks, girl. Shout out
So
to my therapist.
what is going on with me? So you and I hung out in January. We did our little hotel and our
Brought the
spa,
New
and it was
Year's in together.
amazing. And then
Oh
of
no, it
course,
was
as
the
in
day
your
after.
yeah. And then, of
Mhm.
course, as in your hotel, we were having the deepest conversations ever about faith, love, relationship, everything from A to Z.
Yep.
So that was the last time that you and I hung out, or really did a deep catch up. So right after that, I went to Florida. Probably like 2 weeks later, I went to Florida, hung out with my best friend since I've known since I was 3 years old. So my
Oh.
husband and the two kids went, so that was really nice. Um, right after that, we were supposed to go to Texas because I wanted to normalize traveling. Like, what does this look like? I
Mhm.
don't love wearing a mask. I don't love being in quarantine. But now that it's okay to travel, let's do it as safe as possible and see what that looks like. So the
Mhm.
whole family went. We got COVID tests. I could show my friend, hey, we didn't bring anything to you, right? Um, but I didn't enjoy the experience. I was so surprised at how full the airline was. And then of course they're like, you can't take your mask off, which makes sense unless you're eating, but everybody eats at the same time. So everybody's mask is off at the same time. So I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for this yet because it wasn't as responsible as I thought it was going to be. Like, no one asked us for a test, no one did a temperature check. And I'm like, y'all, it is January 2021. Do you not want to be a little bit more stringent? So, anyways, I was supposed to go to Florida right after that. And because of that experience, my husband and I decided not to go. Thankfully, we didn't because that's when the snow in Texas happened. Like literally that week we're
Oh.
supposed to go see our mutual friend. The whole snow thing happened. So thankfully she was okay, but I'm glad that I didn't bring my whole family into that.
Mm.
So that was February. Who remembers what happened in March? April was my mom's birthday. She came out from Connecticut. We did a little luau. So
Oh.
we had the little Hawaiian lays and everything. That was really cute. May was a beast. I started a group coaching program just to kind of pivot from just individual, but also to making more impact in the group space. And I loved it. It was so much
Congrats.
fun. And we did it for 4 weeks. And I was like, all right, y'all, thank you for participating. And they're like, we're doing this again. I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm doing that in June as
Amazing.
well. That was May. And then June, I quit my job.
I was waiting for that. I was waiting for that. Congratulations. Oh
Thank
my
you.
gosh. Oh my gosh. Tell me all the things. What was that like? How did you feel taking that big leap?
Yeah.
Like, how do you feel now? Because wait, are we still in June? Yes, we're still in
Yeah.
June. Okay. I'm like, what month is it? So this just
Yeah.
happened.
It just happened. It is happening. I'm still currently employed by my 9 to 5. So I had a couple of checklists. I
Hmm.
needed to make 10 years at my job to get vested in my pension, and that
Hmm.
happened. Another thing I wanted to do,
Get
thank
them
you.
coins, sis.
Another thing I wanted to do was to get my student loans forgiven. Because I had 10 years in public service, I qualified. But then every time I called them, I was getting a different story. And then I was talking to one person who's actually a project manager for the whole rollout. And she was like, girl, I know 2 people who got forgiven. Let me know how it works out for you. So long story short, I called another time and I spoke to someone who actually sounded like they knew what they were talking about. But that's the person who told me, yeah, you qualify in terms of years, but there are like 10 other criteria that you have to
Mm,
meet. It just sounded to me like a distraction to stay at my job longer. I'm like, forget it, I'll just pay it.
mm.
So I so that was the second criteria. And I'm like, I'm okay with leaving that. The third thing that I wanted to do before I left was to purchase a home. I bought a house April 30th.
Congratulations.
Yeah, so I was just talking to my husband and I was like, are we still okay with this? Like, we know that we have savings. I know that you're working and you can hold down the house. I know that my coaching is, picking up and I could contribute and, continue to do what I need to do. Are you still okay with me quitting? And he's like, yeah, pick a date. So at the end of May, I gave 3 weeks notice, and my last day is June 18th, which just so happens to be my birthday. Coincidence.
Oh my gosh, that's this Friday.
Yes. So this Friday is so I'm actually on vacation this whole week. So
As you did. Usually
so what
time
I
to
did,
go.
I said I'll come in. So on the 21st, I'm gonna work from home, and then on the 22nd, I will go return all my stuff, and then it's official. Yes.
Wow, I'm so proud of you.
Yeah, so there's so many reasons that I wanted you to talk to me today. Obviously, a part of it is a catch up. I wanted to talk about some of the things that you mentioned, like you becoming a confidence coach, you writing the ebook for debt freedom, you talking about your journey. You even quit your job too, and I know that was like a big thing. So I wanted you to talk to me about all of that and just kind of share your journey. But first, let's even start with how we met.
Yes, I was actually wondering if we were going to start back there.
Let's start
Do you
there.
want me to start or you want to
Yeah,
tell
go
the
ahead.
story? Okay, well, this is pre-pandemic, February 2020. I had just moved back to New Jersey, and you mentioned that I quit my job, and I quit for another job. So let me be clear, I'm currently employed, but I was living in Indiana for 2 years after living in New Jersey for 2 years, and I hated it. I thought that it was going to be my dream job. I thought that I was chasing this dream of like climbing the corporate ladder. I'm in the pharma industry and I was in marketing. And I thought that this pharma marketing job was going to be like the thing that was going to like make life feel worth living, um, and then got 2 roles in that space and absolutely
Mhm.
hated it. And I hated the second role more than I hated the first role. So I took the first role and I was like, okay, maybe I hate this one, but maybe I like
Yeah.
the second one. Got the second one and I was like, I hate all of this. And so I was like, you know what? Life is too short. And again, this is pre-pandemic, but I was like,
Mhm.
life is too short. I want to be back near my friends and family, because Indianapolis, like I'm from the Northeast originally. And so Indy was just too far away. And I'm like, life is too short. I'm missing big and small moments in my friends and family's lives. I'm missing baby showers, weddings, um, funerals. Like I'm missing all the things. And I want to be back home. So anyways, made the decision to come back, and literally I moved back in January, and I was like, I'm back in the Northeast. If you're from the Midwest listening to this, like no shade, but like the Midwest has nothing on the Northeast. There's just so much to do here, so much culture, great food, people, and my people are here. So I was like, you know what? I had really gotten big on the Jesus and Joloff podcast with Lovey and Yvonne Orji. And Yvonne was coming to Newark to do stand up like the second or third week of February. And I
Mhm.
had tried to get so many people to come with me, like so many friends, because I'm like, I'm back, let's go out, let's do this and that. I know it's cold outside, but let's go. Literally all of my friends canceled. And I'm like, you know what? I'll go by myself. Like, I don't care. I was in Indy for 2 years solo. I'll go by
Right.
myself. So took an Uber, went, and I was just so excited just to like be out. And then I saw this girl who looked super intriguing. And, I don't know, there's just something you can just tell, like with a person, like there's something about their presence, and their light. And so, like, I saw that in you and I was like, So I just remember making a mental note about you, but we were standing in a line trying to get in. So we didn't exchange words in that moment. And then I think maybe like a few more minutes in of us waiting, you turned around and you were like, oh, I really like your hair.
Mhm.
And I was like, I knew I liked her. Thanks, girl. And then we started talking. And, I was like, what do you do? And you were telling me that you were kind of doing your accountability coaching at that point. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm trying to launch a podcast. I would really love to know more about what you're doing. I told you my journey of me coming home and how I was like probably scared at the time. I don't even remember what I said, but I'm sure I was like excited, but like also like, what the heck?
Right.
And then so we talked a bunch and really just connected in that, the few minutes. And I don't know if we got each other's number in that moment, but I think it was just kind of like, oh, like we connected. And then it was like, okay, they opened the door. So we went into the theater. And so my seats were a little bit further back than yours. And so I go get my seat and I'm like, oh, that was a really nice interaction. Like she was cool thinking that's where it was going to end. And then you were like waving me down, like, come, come, come. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, girl, we just got here. I'm in my seat. I'm seated. Like, you trying to make me climb all these rows to come down. So you're like, no, come, come, come. So I come down and you're like, oh, my friend didn't come. So you can sit here. And I was like, what? You're
Right.
solo too? And you introduced me to the Budgetnista, which was super cool because I follow her and watch her stuff as well. And then, yeah, we just connected. Like after that, we were all laughing at the same jokes, I feel like, with Yvonne. Like, so I was like, oh, I know this girl's sense of humor is hilarious. And then I was like, I would love for you to be my accountability coach. And so I hired you as my coach, or you took me on as a client. And here we are, a year and several months later. Did I leave anything out?
No. So I'm all about like divine connections, and I do not believe in coincidences. I don't believe in accidents. I found out about this comedy show a while ago, right? And I was like, girl, we have to go. I've been telling you about Yvonne, we have to go, we have to go. And my girlfriend was like, yes, let's go. I'm like, I got the tickets, whatever. Long story short, I sent her a message like, hey, do you want to meet there? Do you want, like we're trying to make arrangements. She completely forgets that she double books. So I'm like, all right, no worries. So then I call my other friend. I'm like, hey, my girlfriend can't make it to the show. Do you want to come? You don't have to pay for the ticket. She's like, I would love to go. I love Yvonne Orji. And she was actually one of the people who told me about Jesus and Jollof too. So I'm like, all right, we're in. I said, I have to be in New York City that day, but I can meet you at the event. She's like, okay, great. So I call her. I'm like, hey, I'm leaving New York. What's up? Oh, I checked myself into the hospital. I'm not feeling well. Wait, what? But it wasn't something serious enough for me to have to go visit her in the hospital. It was just, hey, I need to do what I need to do, rest, and then, I'll be okay. She said, go to the show, whatever. And I'm like, okay, fine. So I go to the show. And when I realized that you were by yourself too, this is not like in the moment, but after, I'm like, oh God, now I see it. That's the connection. So when I was calling you down with the tickets, it wasn't like, girl, let's see if we can try to get, let's hope nobody comes for the seat.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were saying.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to sit in nobody else's seat. This is awkward.
No, I wasn't trying to get you kicked out. It was just like, yes, I have this extra ticket. And then when I looked at it in retrospect, this was all God connecting us. Because what are the chances that I would meet a woman who just moved back from Indy, happens to live in Jersey, and we just end up talking from a, hey girl, your hair is cute. Like, right. Really? And then here we are, you've done all these amazing things. So when you quit your job, like what were the things that you were thinking about? Like what were the thoughts going through your head as you decided to make this decision? And what was that turning point of that moment where you said, okay, I'm going to do it. I have to do it. So I know you mentioned like your family, the things that you missed, but what were the other thoughts in your head that were either contradicting or definitely pushing you towards making that decision?
Well, like I said, I think there was so much anticipation for me because coming into the pharma industry, I had done pharma sales for 2.5 years prior to this. So I feel like for 2.5 years, I was working up to like, this is going to be the thing that I do. And this is going to be like that exciting career that is like, oh, you think of like Sex and the City or these shows where it's like, oh, you're walking through the city and your grown-up job. And these people just nobody talks about unhappiness at work or like stress and anxiety and any of that stuff. So I feel like there was all this anticipation of this role being this amazing thing. And when it wasn't, I was devastated.
Yeah.
And feeling like, well, what the heck am I going to do now? Because I built up all this excitement into this thing.
Yeah.
I also think, like I said, we don't talk about anxiety enough. And so when I was in Indiana, I literally ended up in the hospital because I had what I did not know at the time as a panic attack. And I literally, I was supposed to travel that day because my best friend was having a baby and my flight was like at 8 p.m. that night. She had the baby at 8 a.m. that morning. And I was like devastated that I missed this. Like it was like another thing that I missed. And so like, I was like, I was like dizzy and overwhelmed and all this stuff. And again, not knowing that's a panic attack. And I ended up in the hospital and they're like, they gave me all the tests. I was like, no, give me the x-rays and do this and check my B12 blood, like my levels and all this stuff. And they were like, you're fine. And it was actually a Black nurse practitioner who was like, I think this is anxiety. And I'm like, no, like, I don't like, I'm like, I'm not an anxious person. Like, I just do the thing. You know what I mean? Like, yes, things are hard, but like, you just push through and do the thing. So I was so adamant, like, no, it's not. Like, I'm dying. That's what it is. And I need you to figure out what's wrong with me. And her and I actually became cool. We would go out for drinks and things like that. And she was like, I think this is depression and anxiety. And I was like, girl,
Right.
That's too much. But after a while, like I was like, actually, it might be that. And
Mm-hmm.
also I was having really bad stomach issues. And it's like I could not keep any food down. I was having all kinds of reactions to things that I used to be able to eat. I was developing what I thought were allergies. I thought I had IBS.
IBS, yeah.
And like my doctors had me on this very strict diet that was very restrictive, and I was like, what the heck is going on with me? Like, I'm falling apart. I want to go home. I hate this job. It's cold as heck in the Midwest. There's not a lot of Black people here. There's no culture. I want to go home. And it was scary because I feel like it was like, Brianna, you left home to come for this job. Like this, like everybody, you had a big going away party. Like everybody
Yeah.
knew that you were leaving. And so there was this fear of like embarrassment, like I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
go back home, like I was the star-eyed person leaving the nest, and now I'm like coming
Yeah.
back with my tail between my legs. Then I was also like, well, what am I gonna do? Because my industry, going from sales to marketing is a promotion.
Mm-hmm.
And so in order for me to get back to New Jersey, I made a transition from marketing to sales. So it looked like a demotion, even though
Right.
I was making more coins. Um, but that's between me and my pockets. And so I was like, even how am I going to explain that? Like, I'm
Yeah.
going back, I'm going what looks like as backwards. And I know some of my mentors were like, okay, so help me understand this story. Like, how are we going to tell the story, like, to future employers and things like that? And I was just like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just need to get out of here.
Yeah.
So those are kind of all the things I was feeling. I also remember a specific moment where somebody was talking to me crazy at work. And I was like, oh, absolutely not. She has lost her everlasting mind. And before I swing on her, I'm just going to create my exit strategy and be out, because
Yeah.
I don't need to take this. Like, being stressed out at work, feeling empty, depleted. Like, I just didn't feel like I was doing what God put me on this earth to do. And I'm like, God
Mm-hmm.
made me to be more than just somebody getting yelled at a meeting because, something happened and they want to take their frustration out on me. So I was like, you
Right.
know what, Bree? You took the big leap by coming out here. You're going to leap right back and you're going to be fine. Okay.
Yeah. No, no, no. That's so good. And I really thank you for sharing so authentically and so transparently the feelings that you were going through. Because a lot of times we ask ourselves these questions like, how do I explain this? And the answer is you really don't have to explain it, right? But when you're going through it in the moment, that's not the logical thought. You're not
Right.
thinking about that. You're like, well, what are they going to think? I got a demotion. I'm coming back. It didn't work out. I
Mhm.
failed. But we get to write the narrative. And it's not that we're lying or changing the story. It's the way we interpret it.
Mhm.
So going to Indy challenged you personally and professionally, right?
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I personally, and I say this all the time, I personally think Indy was what birthed the Shine Bright podcast,
Absolutely.
right? So tell me about the Shine Bright podcast. What is like the mission, why you created it, and what is it about?
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, where do I start? I feel like when I was in Indy and I was very depressed and dealing with all of that stuff that I didn't even realize I was dealing with, like literally podcasts were the only thing that got me through. So
Oh
driving
wow.
in and out of work, when I was in between meetings, like I had my AirPods in, I was always listening to something. So I would listen to Kev on Stage. It was called Righteous and Ratchet at the time with Doughboy.
Mhm.
I used to listen to that podcast, and they were often talking about like Kev got fired from Boeing, like his corporate job, and Doughboy, who was the other host, like left his job and pursuing their dreams. And so I would listen to that podcast, and it was just like being able to listen in on somebody's conversation about their dreams and chasing their
Mhm.
dreams was just so inspiring. And they were also hilarious. So the humor
Yeah.
like really, really helped me. And then I would also listen to Jesus and Joloff and hear about like how they pushed through. Like Yvonne, both of them thought that they were going to be doctors and
Hmm.
failed chemistry and were humbled, and just talking about their struggle. And just being so transparent. Like both of those podcasts are very transparent podcasts
Hmm.
where they're just honest about who they are and what they're going through. And it just helped me to see myself and see hope. And so I knew that I'm like, I want to create a podcast. I know that I'd be good at this, and I have so much that I want to say.
Yeah.
And so really the mission of the Shine Bright podcast is to encourage women to unapologetically and authentically be themselves and shine their lights brightly in this world and for Christ. And yeah, like I'm like, you know what? I want this to be a space where people listen in and they feel like, dang, like Brie is being so real, or I can see myself in that. So like I said,
Mhm.
last week's episode was about changing and that feeling scary. Like I'm able to be transparent, honest, and say, y'all, like I'm changing. It's scary. If anybody else is there, like just know that you're not alone. And
Yeah.
I had somebody send me a message like, oh my goodness, I listened to that whole podcast episode crying because that's where I'm at.
Aw.
And so I just want people to feel seen. I want them to feel like they just had a great conversation with a good girlfriend, and to just be encouraged to be themselves unapologetically. Like God made you uniquely and unapologetically and beautifully who you are. And sometimes we feel like we need permission to be that person, to take up space. And in my podcast, I just remind all of my listeners, like, you don't need permission to be yourself. Like everything that you need is already in you. So go ahead
Absolutely.
and shine your light brightly, sis.
No, it's funny that you brought up the podcast again because I was just talking to my sister 2 days ago, and I was telling her that one of the things that I love about Yvonne Orji is her authenticity, and she's unapologetic about the decisions that she made. They were
Mm-hmm.
tough because as a Nigerian, you do
Mm-hmm.
not tell your mom that you're going to be a comedian. Like
A
there's
jester,
even
as she
a
said.
jester, right? I was just going to say there's even that one where she's, oh, you're going to be a jester. I'm the reason
Mm-hmm.
for the clown, right? So that had to be so bold of her to go and say, I know you want me to be a doctor. I know the other options are lawyer, engineer,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I want to be a comedian. And really trusting in the plan that God has for you. Because sometimes we look to society or social media or parents or culture or just our gender, like I'm a woman, this is what I'm supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And we try to fit into that norm for what someone else or something else tells us to do. But for Yvonne to say, I know I'm supposed to be a doctor, but I'm going to be a comedian,
Mm-hmm.
that took faith, it took boldness, it took courage. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
same thing that you did, right? So you didn't have to come back and say, oh, I went to India and I hated it. It doesn't matter. It's a part of your journey. But
Mm-hmm.
now, because of that, what are you doing with it? Now you're able to impact all these people who are going through transitions. It doesn't have to be someone who went somewhere and didn't like it. It could be so many different transitions. Like we're always going through something, whether it's from singleness to marriage or marriage to divorce or, to being a widow or,
Hopefully not any of those
right.
last two.
There are always so many different transitions, but people can relate to you because of your authenticity and they can also see themselves in your journey. So I'm so thankful that the Shine Bright podcast came to life.
Well, thank you, girl. You played a big part in helping me to get it off the ground and not to let fear keep me from doing it. So, shout out to you and all of your accountability through that season of launching that project.
My pleasure, my pleasure. Talking about your projects, tell us about being debt free, like your student loans, why it was important for you to share the tools and resources with other people and your workbook.
Yeah. So, okay. Okay. I'm like, where do I even start with this? I feel like I haven't told my debt free journey story in a while. Um, but graduating undergrad, basically, I graduated with $54,000 in student loan debt. And I remember my aunt and uncle sitting me down and saying, like, Brianna, you are young, you don't got no kids, you don't got no real responsibilities, no real bills. And so you should really prioritize paying down your debt. And it was something that I had thought about, like it was in the back of my mind, but I was
Right.
like, but also these trips though, these bags though, I can buy a whole new wardrobe though. Like I had my priorities a little bit messed up. And I remember them saying like within 3 years, they sat me down, looked at my salary, bonuses and all that stuff. And they were like, within 3 years, if you're diligent, you could have this paid off. And I was like, uh-huh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then I remember getting to that 3 year mark and looking at my student loan statement. And I'm like, I've like paid like 5,000. Like it felt like it was
Right.
nothing. Like I was like, what the heck? Like in 3 years, I paid nothing. And I always paid above my minimum.
Of course.
But because of interest and
Interest,
compounding
baby.
interest, I was like, what the heck is this? And so I got really upset. And I'm like, this is stupid. This system is set up to keep you forever in debt. And I was like, no, like I'm going to be very diligent. And this was also at the time that I was moving to Indiana or getting ready to move to Indiana. So I'm like, the cost of living is much cheaper out there. So if I can sacrifice like, because Indy, the cost of living was much cheaper, but like you could still live downtown and,
Mhm.
be paying relatively low rent at the time. But I was like, no, we're not going to live downtown. Like we're going to move a little bit further up north. You'll have a 20-minute commute to work. Apartment was still nice, but not like as lavish and as nice as I
Right.
would have wanted it to be, because I'm like, look, we're gonna have this $800 rent so that you can put the rest of your money to what you need to put it towards. Um, and so I did that. I got a second job, even though like I worked a corporate 9 to 5, great job. I was like, look, we're gonna go work at Loft
Mm-hmm.
so that I can put all of my 9 to 5 money towards my bills and my debt. And then my Loft money was what was like my fun money, which
Yeah, yeah.
really was not many coins, but it was like, okay, you can get tacos every Thursday and maybe you can go out for drinks once a month. Um, but yeah, I just decided that I don't want to be debt free. I'm sorry, I want to be debt free. I don't
Right.
want to carry this debt with
Mm-hmm.
me, because it's a shackle. And so I'm like, why not do it now before 30, make it happen? And when I did the numbers, I'm like, oh, I can make this happen fairly quickly. Well, not, I mean, in hindsight, it looks quick,
Right.
but in the moment, it's, feeling like it's a long time. And so I got very diligent with my budgeting and with putting money aside to pay down my debt. And I did that. And then really it was the pandemic and the CARES Act, which
Yes.
stopped all interest from accruing. And I was like, this is our year, baby. So I was like, okay, girl, like no interest is accruing. And this is your time to like be diligent. We're stuck in the house. You're not traveling. You're not eating out. Like, let's do it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's what I did. And along the way, for accountability, because I knew like if I'm the only person holding myself accountable to this goal, like chances are, like with weight loss, if it's only between you and the scale, like you might have the extra fry or the burger. But if you tell somebody, you're like, okay, hold me
Mm-hmm.
accountable, they're going to do that. And so for me, I started sharing my monthly debt updates on Instagram just because it was content and I wanted people to hold me accountable.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what my community kind of rallied around me and did. And like every month they would see like, okay, yes, you paid this off. And along the way, people would ask me like, how are you doing it? How are you approaching it? And for me, I was like, it's not that hard. Like, look at how much you make, look at
Mm-hmm.
how much your bills are. And then whatever you have extra, you put that towards debt. But people were constantly asking me for advice and for tips and things like that. And so I created a workbook basically showing people how I budget, the steps that I go through to plan to spend, because I think a lot of people don't plan to spend. They just spend and they're like, oh, shoot, I overspent.
Yeah.
So I talk about my process of like the checklist and the criteria that I go through before I spend. Also saving, because that's super important. If 2020 taught us anything, it's that you need to have your coins for a rainy day or a global pandemic. And so I kind of talked about all of that in my workbook and also how I approach paying down my debt, and different things that I did to earn more income to be able to pay down my debt quicker. Um, and yeah, I mean, because since I have transitioned to doing confidence coaching, I don't sell the workbook
Yeah.
anymore, but I definitely have a lot of people that used it and that were very, it was super helpful for them, a very helpful tool. And that was my first stab at like selling some product or digital
Yeah.
product. And so to see how well that did, and even things that I learned from that, I was like, like I can pivot into using my platform for what I really am passionate about. So I
Yeah.
could have stayed in the personal finance space, but I was like, but what I'm more passionate about is like talking to people like, what's your dream? And why do you feel like you
Mm-hmm.
can't do it? What's holding you back? What purpose did God place in your heart that you feel like you're too scared or you're ill equipped to do? And how can I help you feel confident in doing that and believing in yourself? Um, so yeah, I hope that answered your question, but
That
that's
definitely answers the question, and you're going right into the next question, which is your pivot. So tell us all about confidence coaching.
okay. So I so even before I had fully pivoted, I had taken a couple of clients on, and I think you and I had talked about this at the
Mm-hmm.
time when you were still coaching me, just to like see what I like, what it is that I want to do. So I at first was taking on the accountability coaching piece too. I was like, oh, like, like I love what Ro does for me, and I know that I can do this for other people and like helping hold them accountable. But what I realized is that what a lot of people lack when it comes to what a lot of people need most more than accountability is the confidence to believe that they can do it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
for example, when you were coaching me, so I realized that most of my clients were lacking confidence. So I could hold them accountable to, hey, you said you were going to do this and
Yeah.
you wanted to have your blog out by this time and you were supposed to do this and that. But it's like, but the root issue actually there is that you don't feel confident enough, or you feel insecure, or you don't feel like you're good enough, or all that stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is actually what I'm more passionate about doing, instead of like, task management, being like, hey, did you do this today or that today? I was
Yeah.
like, no, I'm more passionate about being like, why don't you believe in yourself? Like, you don't believe that you're a
Mm-hmm.
bomb. You don't know that the world needs the blog that you're putting out there. And so that is kind of how, that's initially what sparked that pivot. But I was afraid because I'm like, I had built a almost 9,000 follower platform around personal finance. And I was
Right.
like, and it was so crazy because as I was thinking about pivoting, one of my debt-free reel that I made when I announced that I was debt-free, like went viral and like 4,000 people followed me. And I was like, no, like I'm trying to pivot away from personal finance. I was like,
Like you're late.
yes, I was like, oh my gosh, these people are going to come here with all these expectations of the content that they want me to create. And like, I'm trying to jump off the ship. So
Right.
I was very scared to announce that I was pivoting. Very, but I did it. And I announced it before I even like had my program. Like I still don't have my program. I'm still working on it. But I was like, I don't want people to keep coming here with the expectation that I'm going to
Mhm.
be talking about personal finance. And so I just announced like, hey guys, like I'm transitioning. So like I said, I'm currently in a space of building up my program because I also want to do a group coaching program as well. So you and I are going to have to talk so I can pick your
Yes.
brain about that. But yeah, that's, I'm in this space. That's why I said like this space of changing and letting myself become this butterfly, running, being a 9 to 5 employee and also like creating your own business and also having a podcast. Like it is a lot. And I have
Mhm.
spent some time being burnt out. And now that the world is opening back up again and friends want to hang out and, you know, people want to gather, it's like, oh my goodness, like how do I balance the time for my business and
Right.
also for my friends and my family? And I know you've helped me a lot with balance and harmony, as you
Yes.
say. But yeah, I think that I'm in the space of creating my program. But it's, yeah, it can be a little bit nerve wracking because it's like
Right.
confidence coach. Like, what is that? Did you just make that up? Like, what does that,
Yes, and
right? Like, and what does that mean? Who needs your services? So I'm just trying to get very specific on like who, because confidence is so broad, right?
of course.
So who are the people that I want to work with? What kind of programming do I want to offer? Do I want to do
Mhm.
one-on-one? Because I've done the one-on-one before, but I think in the group space, like you can really feed off of like one another and see that you're not
Absolutely.
alone. So these are all the things that I'm thinking through, and really excited to hopefully launch this program by the end of this year.
Yay! Good stuff. Good stuff. So, one of the things I have to say, if it's any consolation, I don't think people followed you on Instagram just because of your student loan or your financial journey. People followed you and gravitated to you because one, you're transparent, two, you're authentic, three, you're brilliant, four, you're animated, right? So like your videos, you're so funny, you're beautiful. So I think that they gravitated to you. So whatever you're doing, if you wanted to do fashion and styling, they're like, okay, what pants do I need to buy? If you wanted to become a dentist, they're like, all right, so how do I get my teeth white? I really think that people were encouraged and inspired by your journey, and they actually followed you because you knew what you were talking about, because you were showing receipts like, okay, 5,000 left, 4,000 left, right? So they definitely followed you for that. But I think that's such a small percentage. So whatever you decide to do, my love, be unapologetic and shine bright and be confident because the people are there. They're there for you. Whatever you want to do. You want to sell lipstick? Okay, tell me what color. Like whatever it is,
Girl,
they're there for you. Yeah.
I received that. Thank you so much. It's so funny because when I made the pivot, like I told my audience, I was like, y'all, like I was really scared. I thought all of y'all were gonna leave. And somebody said that they were like, girl, you could be talking about recycling and we would still be here. And I was like, oh my gosh, really? Like, so
Absolutely.
I really appreciate that. But
Yeah.
yeah,
And it's not even fluff. Like I've seen some of your YouTube channels. I think I actually watched one of the ones where you started with like, I quit my job. And I'm like, I love this girl. Like you're such a great on-air personality. You're a breath of fresh air. So people definitely want that. Like they see that confidence in you. And even when you're not feeling fully confident, you're sharing that. So they're
mhm.
getting the best of both worlds. They're seeing when you're killing it, and they're seeing when you're like, yo, I'm afraid, y'all. So
Yeah,
they can
because
relate to you.
confidence isn't just about like, oh my gosh, yes, I'm always on, I'm gonna kill it. Like that's not real life. Like it's
Right.
not. There are moments where you're like, holy crap, I don't know how I'm gonna do this, but you show up anyways and you say like, you know what, I don't believe that God would bring me here to fail. I believe that he has put amazing things in me. There are seeds that he's planted in me that are going to become trees with fruit. And so
Yeah.
I'm stepping in that. And so I do want people to know that like confidence isn't on all the time, or confidence isn't always feeling like, oh, I'm going to kill this. Yes, you will be
Yeah.
afraid, but you feel the fear and you do it anyway. And you believe that like, I can do this.
Yeah.
I can kill it. Okay. Like I always say, like I don't know if it's still I have, because I haven't public spoke in a while, but like
Mhm.
have a fear of public speaking, but I push myself to do it anytime. And I always get people that are like, oh my gosh, like I love when you spoke and this is that. And I'm like, little do they know I was so afraid, but guess
Yeah.
what? I do it anyway.
You did.
And I'm currently listening to Lovey's book, Professional Troublemaker. I don't know if
Yes.
you've heard it or listened to it, but Lovey talks about that too, where she's like, when she did her TED talk, she was scared out of her mind and she did it anyway. So
Yeah.
confidence isn't, oh yeah, I'm on all the time. Like, no, you feel the fear, you do it anyway.
Yeah. And speaking of Lovey, there's something that she started talking about a couple months ago where she talks about loaning confidence, like you're lending someone confidence. And I feel like that's
Mm-hmm.
something that you will
Or
do
your
too. So
courage.
yeah, like even when someone doesn't feel like they're equipped or they don't feel like they're enough, you can lend them the confidence. Like, I believe in you. I think you
Yeah.
can do it. And then once they build it on for themselves, then it's like you take the training wheels off and have them go right off. So I think you're definitely um, the perfect person to do this. And I'm so excited to watch your journey. One thing we kept sprinkling in throughout the whole conversation is Jesus. So Jesus is Bae. Tell me about your
Mm-hmm.
relationship with God, and then share any final thoughts that you want to leave with us.
Yeah. Well, that is a very heavy and a great question, because I feel like me and Jesus are in a space also of transitioning and relearning. And I think that a lot of times as Christians, we have a very transactional
Mm,
relationship, or very transactional view of God, myself included, where you're like,
yep.
okay, I do this thing and you give me this thing. And I
Right.
don't know if you've heard the song Jireh by Maverick City.
Maverick City. Yes.
Yes. And in the song, and I don't remember the exact words, but it's like, I was never holding you up. And so I feel like, so I can't let you down. And I feel
Mm,
like my relationship with Jesus right now is just being reminded that, like, Brie, like, you were never holding him up, so you can't let him down. There's nothing that you can do that will disappoint him, that will make him not love you. There's nothing that you can do. Like, he hasn't forgotten about you. I think
yeah.
in the pandemic, it's so easy to, especially like as a single person, to feel lonely and forgotten about. Especially when like everybody's like getting like quarantine days and you're like, wait a minute, did I miss did I miss the train? Like, where was this? Um and so I think just this space of like surrendering, and it hasn't been
Mhm.
easy, right? Because you want your results now, right? Or the thing now, and just being like, hey God, like, do you still remember the dreams that I have? Like, do you still
Yeah.
remember that like I'm here? Um and do you still remember the promises that you made to me? Um and I think that I am in that space of like just remembering that like he hasn't forgotten me,
Of course.
and that just all of the things, like all of the divine connections, like we started talking about, like him bringing me back to New Jersey before the pandemic. Like this was 2-3 months before, like, and I wake up
Yeah.
every morning and I'm like, God, I could have been stuck in Indiana where
Oh
I
my
was already
gosh.
depressed, where
Oh
I was
wow.
already
I didn't think
going through,
about that.
girl, literally, I wake up every morning with that on my mind. Like, I could have still been in Indiana if you did not, because I just like I feel like he made me so uncomfortable there, like with my, my stomach issues, the anxiety, the depression. Like, I wanted so hard to hold on and be like, I'm gonna do it, I'm strong, I can do it. And he was like, girl, go.
Go.
And I actually was going to wait. I wasn't going to quit my job until March of 2020, because when I moved, my job gave me a relocation package. And
Mhm.
so if you didn't stay 2 years, you would have to pay them back. And March 2020 is when that time would have been up. So I was going to wait until March to not leave. And that's
God.
literally when the world shut down. I wouldn't have been
Yes.
able to find a job, like all of that stuff. And so I wake up and I'm like, God, you knew, you saw. And in those moments where I feel forgotten, like, remind me that you see me, that you saw me, that I am
Mhm.
in the palm of your hands, that I am not spinning out of control. And that's where I am.
Yeah.
That is where I am.
And I I honestly believe that our relationship is supposed to evolve. So I know you mentioned it kind of cautiously, like, oh, it's changing, but I feel like it should, because as we're growing, then our relationship should change. So
Mhm.
in the beginning of our relationship, we're quote unquote drinking milk. And as we
Mhm,
get
mhm,
more information, then, we're eating meat and stronger foods. So I think even as situations in our life change, our relationship with God changes because we're seeing him differently, right? So maybe we've experienced God as a healer and we're like, all right, God, I know you can heal my physical body. I've seen you that way. But
mhm,
then you're like, wait, can I trust you as a provider? I don't know you that way
mhm,
yet, right? So
mhm,
as you go through different transitions in life and then you start to see God show up in different ways, then I think your relationship will continue to evolve. So I don't think it's good, bad, or indifferent. I think it just is what it is, right? So I think it's interesting how you talked about that transaction because a lot of times it's like kind of like that vending machine, like
mhm,
insert prayer, give me a man,
mhm,
insert prayer, give me a car. And I remember when I had my first child, I felt like that. It was okay, cry, I have to nurse this kid. And I just kind of felt like I was a vending machine for this little baby. And
mm,
so when I wrote my first book, I used that example of are we treating God as a vending machine? Like is it
mm,
solely transactional? But as you start to realize that it's a relationship, it's such a different place where like, all right, God, so I'm feeling forgotten. And then you're being authentic about how you're feeling. Hey, I feel lonely. I feel excited. I feel overwhelmed. You just share transparently how you're feeling. So, yes, there are definitely going to be transitions and different changes in your life. And as long as we embrace them and just be honest about them, then
mhm.
I think we're on the right path.
I love that.
So, final thoughts, love. What do you want to share? Anything you want? Lessons learned, favorite quote, book, anything.
I feel like I've been sprinkling all of that all in. Like my favorite books, the things that I'm currently listening to. I'm listening to Levy's Professional Troublemaker, and actually Obama's book Promised Land, which makes me
Okay.
so emotional as I listen to it because it's like you're just listening to history be told. I feel like, and it's like I'm listening to the audiobooks. It's like Obama telling me like a story. I love it.
Oh, it's in his voice?
Yes, it's in
I
his
didn't read it and I
voice.
didn't know the audiobook. Okay.
It is in his voice. I love it. It's long. It's 26 hours, but
Mhm.
it's really good. And then hopefully I'll be getting Yvonne's book soon, Bamboozled by
Bamboozled by
Jesus.
Jesus. I didn't
Um,
read it yet.
I haven't read it yet either. Um, Final thoughts. I mean, I think to anybody that is listening, we are all coming out of quarantine differently. Like I said this, coming into this. So give yourself some grace as you interact with friends. Like you might have a little bit of social anxiety. It might be awkward. You might feel like this is weird. I think we're all going through that at the same time. And so give yourself grace. Give yourself grace to become the caterpillar that's turning into the butterfly. And just know that you are exactly where you're supposed to be. And I feel like
Mm,
I always have to remind myself of that. Like I always have to reground myself when I'm feeling like, oh my God, I'm supposed to be doing this and this person's doing that and this is that. And it's like so easy to get caught back up in the rat race. And I
yeah.
saw this quote that said like life didn't slow us down for this past year and a half for us to just pick back up and start zooming and letting life run us ragged again. And so if you're
Right.
feeling, and it convicted me, this is me speaking to me, but like in those moments where I'm feeling like like I just have to remind myself like you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Like I literally just take a deep breath and I'm like, God has you in the palm of his hands. You are exactly where you're supposed to be. So whether you're in a space of trying to figure it out or you thought you had it figured out and you have to pivot, you're feeling broken, you're feeling sad, you're feeling insecure, not confident, like I encourage you to go to God with that and know that
Mhm.
you are exactly where you're supposed to be and that you are in his hands and he has not forgotten about you. And this is me speaking to myself as well. He has not forgotten you are in his hands, sis.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. Thank you so, so much for sharing all of that. That was so beautiful. And I know that anyone listening will just be so inspired by your journey, by that thought that you just shared with us and just by everything that you have going on. As you were talking, it reminded me of one of your podcast episodes when you talked about reintroducing yourselves to your friends,
Mm,
right? So it's like you know this friend from a long time ago and they're like, oh yeah, I know Brie, her favorite color is purple. Well, when I was in seventh grade it was, but my
right.
favorite color is rose gold now, right? So I think as the pandemic kind of ends, hopefully,
Hmm.
it's like reintroducing yourself to other people. My sister was saying maybe I was an introvert all this time because I'm enjoying this, right? So it's like figuring out who you are,
Hmm.
understanding the change, and then also reintroducing yourself to people and to new or to other circumstances or situations. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing. Where can we find you?
You guys can find me on Instagram at Brianna Christel. You guys can find the podcast at Shine Bright Podcast on Instagram, or you can find the Shine Bright Podcast by typing in Shine Bright Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, Anchor, all of the places. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your world with us. Love you, honey.
Of course. Love you too, girl. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. If yes, you'll receive an email.